Next up, the 5 Live Formula One team are here, looking ahead to this weekend's Grand Prix in Singapore. Races under the lights of Singapore this weekend, and it's the first time that one of the two championships can be wrapped up. Yes, Red Bull have the chance to claim their 6th Constructors' title here at the Marina Bay Street Circuit, with Max Verstappen going for his 11th victory in a row. I'm Rosanna Tennant, and this is 5 Live Formula One. Welcome to the paddock here at the Marina Bay Street Circuit. A very hot and humid one, but the sun has set, so we've got a little bit of respite now. A little bit of a breeze has picked up, and I'm glad to be joined in the cool of McLaren's hospitality area by Scott Mitchell-Malm, F1 journalist from the race. And to my right, I have the F1 correspondent for The Sun, Ben Hunt. Good evening, guys. This is a magical place to go racing. Lights are on. It's looking very glamorous. Are you feeling very glamorous, Scott?
Slightly more so than when walking to the circuit earlier when the sun had not set, and what I can only be I don't have an optimal cooling setup for this Grand Prix. I'm lacking upgrades, unlike some of the teams.
Taps were turned on. Managed to dry out, I'm hoping.
I think these are more suitable temperatures now. I'm back in my operating window, so this is fine.
I love how you just talk F1 chat, regardless whether we're talking about sweaty backs under a rucksack or not. Ben Hunt, I imagine a similar situation. It is incredibly hot here when the sun is out, but we're lucky now the sun's set.
Yeah, it is warm. My strategy is slightly different to yours, Scott. I was on the MRT, which is like the tube. It's all air conditioned, and you can get all the way here to the circuit. You get out and there's a short little walk at the other end, so perfect. All very good.
Oh, well, guys, how's your geography?
Go for it. Go on. What's the question?
Okay, Scott.
Ben can go first.
Oh, okay, I see.
You volunteered.
Just slide that over the other side of the table then. Okay, so Singapore Grand Prix is the closest race to the equator that we go to. But I want to know, how far is the equator from us? Were you good at geography at school?
No, I studied history instead. So, do you know what? I have no idea.
Okay, first things first. Are we north or south of the equator?
Well, the fact you've said that, we've got to be south,
Got to be south, yeah.
No.
Oh, wow.
Good.
There's a good start. Okay.
Okay, so we are north of the equator. So come on, give me some mileage. What do you reckon? Or degrees, if you're that way inclined.
1,000 kilometres.
Oof, quite far away. Quite far away. Really? Scott.
How far off is it?
We're like a lot off, like 10 times over.
Okay, I would say a different answer to Ben by a magnitude of about 10 times either higher or lower would be my rough guess.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're listening. Okay, would you like me to give you your answer?
Yes, please.
Absolutely, yes.
So it's 97.43 miles north of the equator, or 1.5 degrees.
I was basically right.
Yeah.
I got that pretty spot on.
Well, look, the geography's over. Let's get back to Formula One. We've spoken about the trials and tribulations of getting to the circuit because it is a little hot. But are you fans of this particular race circuit itself? A street circuit under the lights?
Yeah. It's a fantastic place. You know, it looks great on TV. We've seen, this was the original night race, and we've seen a lot of people try and copy it, and they do a fairly good job. But this is the original. I love it here. I love the heat. I love the facilities we've got here as well. Track is special. No room for error. I just really, really enjoy it. I like the absurdity of sort of waking up at 3 p.m. in the afternoon and then going for breakfast, because we obviously stay on European time.
So I was going to ask you that. You buy into that, do you?
100%. Yeah,
Scott, do you?
I try to, but body let me down this morning. I've been up since 8 a.m.
Looking fresh on it, my friend. Minus those sweat patches. Oh, no. So you both do that? Because I actually don't.
Oh, really?
No. Foolishly or otherwise. I don't know, I just feel like a late night around 12 or 1 in the morning, I can still get up at 8 or 9. It's not like I need to then...
You're more of a Nico Hülkenberg then, because he was saying earlier today that he kind of just goes with the flow and just sort of sees how the week plays out, because by the time he gets in the car, he just has to get on with it anyway. You don't have a choice. You can't have a nap in the middle of the Grand Prix.
I thought you were going to say I'd just pull the early shift and go home early when you guys are all still here with the engineers at 3 or 4 in the morning. But also Singapore's a great city. There's lots to see, and if you're waking up at 2 or 3 and then heading straight into the track, I feel like you're missing out on an amazing opportunity to see the city.
It's a slightly different city when you're scratching around looking for places to eat at 2, 3 in the morning. You end up at these 24-hour food stalls, which is a great experience. I think that's probably why I like it, to be honest. Everywhere else we go, it's all very conventional, eating in hotels, restaurants, whereas this you're made to work a little bit more and try and find these places at this time. And for me, that's quite good, because with the race scheduling now, everything's a lot later. We're finishing on, Saturdays and Sundays. Sometimes you're not getting back to your hotel at 10 o'clock, and then it's a big old scramble to find food, even at, those times. When you're doing it now at 3 a.m., there's nothing open except for the hawker restaurants that I mentioned. You've really just got to embrace that. And you go there and you're sat next to fellow F1 people from different teams, etc. So you're all it's kind of like a Dunkirk spirit, isn't it? Almost like you're all brought together and, you're kind of working together to get through the weekend. Yeah,
the drivers work hard out on track. We're working hard trying to find somewhere to eat in the evening. I like it. But Scott, apart from waking up early, you like to follow the European time zone, which then, if you're going on to Japan, it requires something different then come Monday morning.
It is painful. I am doing both of these races on site, so I think I'm heading over on Tuesday, so I at least have Monday to sort of half return. But the thing about this weekend, I think for everybody, including the drivers, is you do at least have the chance to you can kind of ease into it, like across Wednesday, Thursday, and then into Friday. You don't have to switch like on a dime on Thursday and then come in. So it has got a little bit of a give, but that's about as forgiving as this race gets, because I'm actually quite disappointed with the track changes. I know that they're kind of forced, but I love how physically and mentally demanding this circuit is, and just removing a few of those corners from the final sector it's still probably the hardest track on the calendar. The drivers probably won't like me for saying this, but I just wish it had been kept just as hard as it was before.
Well, a lot of the drivers love this track. Some are saying it's their favourite. Charles Leclerc saying it's one of his favourites. I think he particularly enjoys street circuits. But you've taken away those corners. Now we've got a straight towards the end of the track. Are we going to see more overtakes?
Probably not.
No.
And this isn't really about the overtaking this place. It's all about the mistakes, as we've seen in the past. And once you take the jeopardy out, and it's only a couple of corners, but you are eliminating the room for error, and that's really what we want. We want to see overtaking, of course, but it's forcing the drivers to be on it all the way through the lap and performing to the best of their ability. By taking that jeopardy away, you're kind of making it a little bit easier for them. And I'd rather if it stayed as it was, to be honest.
And come quali, maybe even easier to keep a handle on your tyres, because it's not going to be so rough on the tyres towards the end of the lap.
You've definitely got that element of the car and the tyres and everything kind of hanging on a little bit more. I mean, the fact that the track, I think the teams are estimating around 10 seconds faster, so it's 10 seconds fewer that you need to have everything. Your electrical deployment, for example, needs to go that little bit less far. Your cooling demand is just that, it's relaxed just that tiny bit. The driver's concentration, the tyres, everything is just, whether it's even a percent of like a reduction in the challenge for everything, I'm sure that'll help. I do suspect that'll help more when you're getting towards the end of whatever it is, a 20 or 30 lap stint, than it will one lap in qualifying.
100%, because it will allow the drivers just to have a breather, the time just a few seconds of just relaxing rather than worrying about those final 2 turns.
So let's look at the runners and riders then. Max Verstappen still leading the standings, 145 points now ahead of us. It is, isn't it? There's an adjective. We were saying we were running out of adjectives in Monza. There is just, it is a case of go to the thesaurus and try and find more words.
Yeah, I mean, when he's on this run, you look at it and you think, wouldn't it be good if someone else won? And yes, it would be, but now he's got to this point of setting records, 10 in a row. Let's see how far he can go, because we're part of history here. We're witnessing something that we may never see again. And so I want to see him do as much as he can, because I want to be there when the record does fall and I can look back in time and go, I remember him winning, 14, 15, 16, whatever it is in a row, because it is such an achievement that I do think that we do need to take our hats off to him. Of course, we want to see other teams win. That's the whole point of Formula One, to be more competitive. But it's up to the other guys to take the challenge to him. It's not up to him to lose, it's to others to catch up.
And that's the thing, we all show up here, race weekend in, race weekend out, to see the best. And that is Max Verstappen in a Red Bull at the moment, isn't it? So that's what we're all here for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I agree that it's something that should be applauded in much the same way that Red Bull going for the perfect season, a whole season of winning every single race. Now, there was definitely a point up until fairly recently where the idea scared me and it wasn't something I was particularly looking forward to. But definitely, I've said this a few times now, and maybe some people don't always agree with me when I say this, I think I have passed the tipping point. Yeah. And I think I am now. It's like, okay, it will kind of make sitting through a season of domination worth it if it's an unprecedented achievement at the end of it. If we get one or two slightly undramatic races in which they're beaten for whatever reason, like they slip up and it's unspectacular and it's just another relatively normal winner in the grand scheme of things, I kind of feel like that won't be as much payback for the stamina that we've all had. I massively appreciate and respect the performance of the team and Max individually as a driver. I think he's phenomenal. But it has taken some stamina to sit through that level of domination. And I want that to be rewarded for everybody.
There we go.
Do you know what, though, guys? I do question, when you go to your editors, Ben, and say, Max again, do you have to, is it a hard sell now?
Yeah, it is. It's much harder. I mean, we focus so much on the British drivers, and to have one or not have one in the title race is difficult. And every week he's winning, but winning also by such a margin. It kind of feels like it's on repeat. There was a colleague that was joking at the last race, I'll just dust off my old race report from the previous race and I'll just change a few of the numbers. We don't do that, but it sometimes feels like that. And when you file a story, they're in the office, they're not here, they're not privy to the stories and what's going on behind the scenes. They probably do feel a bit like it's Groundhog Day. And I think that is kind of reflected as well in the news sort of agenda in the UK as well. I mean, when we do see different winners, we see F1 bumping up the news schedule. It'll appear on the news much more prominently. That said, there are still stories bubbling around, which we may get onto in a minute. But, it is a harder sell when you've got one man winning all the time.
Yeah, the headlines might read similarly, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, not just for you writing the copy, but also, as Max alludes to stay at the top requires probably sometimes even more hard work.
Yeah, it's a different level of focus, isn't it? And obviously, maintaining that consistency, it requires something else. And then it almost becomes, a problem, if you like, to keep winning. You've really got to keep that run going, and you put more pressure on yourself to be even better. We can't afford any mistakes because we don't want to stop winning.
Well, let's hear from Max Verstappen then. He made it 10 in a row in Monza. I wonder if he'll make it 11 consecutive race wins this weekend. This was Max speaking earlier in the press conference.
Now, what about this record? You've got 10 in a row now. You have the record. Does that take the pressure off? Or is there almost increased pressure because you want to see how far you can take this run?
No, I never really looked at the, number 8, 9, 10. I just always want to do the best I can. So naturally, every single weekend, it's basically the same amount of pressure you put on yourself to try and get the best result out of it. So nothing really changes, actually, from that side.
And remarkably, Max, Red Bull Racing can, mathematically at least, claim the Constructors' Championship this weekend. In your 8 years at the team, has it ever been operating at such a high level as it is in 2023?
I think we always had quite high level performance as a team, but we just didn't have that good of a car, I think, up until this year. Of course, last year already the car was very good, but the years before we were close, but, winning here and there, not fighting for the constructors. But yeah, I think everything really came together. We understood this new regulation really well. And when you have the good people, also in every single position, and you can achieve something like you're witnessing right now.
So Max Verstappen, the one to beat this weekend, and Red Bull looking like they could take the Constructors' Championship this weekend. Everything's got to go their way, Scott. How important is the Constructors? Because ask, casual fans about championships, they'll tell you about the drivers one, won't they?
Yeah, well, the drivers are the stars and the centre of attention for everybody watching in terms of fans, and I think for us when we're paying attention to it, you're more moved by what a driver achieves because there's a human element there, an individual human element that you can relate to. But for everything else that makes this show tick, including the sponsors, the TV broadcasters. Like the team element is enormous, because first of all, for the teams, the broadcast revenue, the sponsor revenue, all of that gets paid out in bulk in Constructors' Championship prize money. So for that singular reason, it's the most important thing for the team. It is also a manifestation of the hundreds, and in Red Bull's case, thousands of people that are working back at base to get the car as good as it is, to get everything absolutely ready to be able to break these records and win these championships. There will be people, not just the drivers, but there will be individual people who have bonuses tied to championship success and things like that. And for your sponsors and partners, I can't imagine the likes of Oracle and other Red Bull partners have been particularly thrilled by the lack of airtime that they've probably had on TV this year, because you just don't really show the car that's driving around 20 seconds ahead of everybody else. But you get to the end, you can call yourself champions. There's an enormous PR value to that, a load of promotional activity you can do. So for the teams and their partners, that's the big one. I know that Red Bull really covet the Drivers' Championship and really want that 1-2, because it's just always eluded them, so they're really keen on that. But in terms of the value, the Constructors' Championship is the one.
Of course, there are teams hoping to stop them. It seems unlikely at this stage that Red Bull will be stopped from taking the Constructors' Championship for 2023. But of course, the Ferraris are a team to add into the mix, although I feel the sort of second best of the rest team, it toys between Ferrari, Aston Martin, McLaren, Mercedes. But let's go back a bit to the Italian Grand Prix, where we were treated to some exceptional racing from the two Ferraris, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, battling hard. Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the crowd did as well. I mean, for me, Monza's always a great circuit. My background's working in football, and when you have a crowd like you have in Monza, it reminds me of a football crowd where you hear cheering and they react first, so I can hear the cheers. Then I look at the screen, which there's a slight delay on the pictures, and you can see what's going on, and you're like, wow, this is what we want to see. We want to see teams fighting really hard for points. Obviously, we want to see them fighting for wins, but fighting for a podium. And it was great that Ferrari allowed them to race like that, despite warning them initially. They were allowed to race, and great to see. That's what we want.
Were you surprised that they were as lax as they were letting them race, Scott?
I wasn't, purely because I think Ferrari has a history, especially in the recent and maybe not so recent past, of just not being quite emphatic enough with team orders and the way they want to play things. I think you could argue on one hand it was quite foolish of them, because there was a podium on home soil at Monza. A win, even finishing second, was never particularly likely. But getting that podium would have been a huge result, because the performance range of that car this season, there's been enormous swings this year, way more than any other team. So this was always a track, or Monza was always a track that they were gearing towards as an opportunity. Home soil, in front of the Tifosi, to jeopardise a podium was kind of silly. On the other hand, absolutely love it. It's exactly what we're all here for, and it was nice to be reminded that F1 can be sport and entertaining.
The greatest entertainment spectacle on earth. Well, I spoke to Charles Leclerc a little earlier on in the media pen, and I asked if he'd actually watched back the Italian Grand Prix to see what went on between himself and Carlos Sainz.
I did a little bit, yes. The last few laps, they were exciting. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I mean, again, this is the kind of racing that I fell in love with when I started in karting and first watching the first Formula 1 races. So I liked it.
Okay, so everyone was doing the right thing. It was all okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And when it comes to this track, you've gone well in the past, but knowing what you know about this year's car, can you do anything similar?
Well, I will try, as always, but I think we will struggle more compared to the performance we've seen in Monza, by example, where we were very, very strong. I mean, it was a very strong weekend for us, even though Red Bull remained stronger on the Sunday. I expect us to struggle more here and be more in the fight with the McLaren, Mercedes and Aston Martin than being close to Red Bull.
So that was Charles Leclerc having a chat with me earlier on. What do you think we learnt from Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz during that Italian Grand Prix, and what do you think it tells us about the rest of the season?
I think the dynamic is heating up between the two. I think there's we hear it sometimes over the radio where one driver thinks he's faster than the other. I think this has set the benchmark going forward, in the sense that they are allowed to fight, and I hope that leads to more on-track battles when they're more competitive. Maybe next year we could see the two battling out for more podiums. That's ultimately what I hope. I think Carlos Sainz has improved considerably over the last 18 months. There seems to be a new confidence. He's cutting out the mistakes, and I think that's been good to see. I think Charles also realises now he's not going to get his own way all the way through. So I think that's great.
Yeah, nice to see them battling. Obviously, that was on home soil. We're now in a very different territory. The circuit is very different. Charles telling me that he doesn't think they're going to mix it with Red Bull. It's going to be that fight with the pack of the Aston Martin, McLaren, Mercedes bunch, Scott. Can they be slightly ahead of that lot, or are they in the melee?
I think it is going to be difficult for them to be second best this weekend. If Monza's the absolute peak of what that package is capable of, partly because they also were one of, if not the only team to produce a proper Monza special rear wing, because they knew that car's stronger at low drag, so therefore they optimised the car as much as they possibly could for low drag.
And the Tifosi.
Yes, exactly. The two go hand in hand. Whereas here, you're back at high downforce.
Yeah.
And as Charles has mentioned already today, that's just not where they shine. And we know that is also at the same time where the likes of Mercedes should be more competitive. So I think they might struggle to beat Mercedes here, and McLaren have got another upgrade as well. We've seen the progress that they've made, especially since Austria, with what some have been calling the B-spec package. So I think they will struggle to be second best again here. I think it would be a surprise to them if they were able to be mixing it for a podium.
And yet they've gone so well here in the past, Charles Leclerc especially, pole positions and podiums here. This car not seemingly going to go so well. And you mentioned Mercedes, Scott. Again, this is normally a bogey track for Mercedes, and yet, bizarrely, they go better on high downforce circuits this year. So it's so difficult, isn't it, to know who's where?
It is. It's difficult to predict who's going to be second, isn't it? But that's where we are. We are at the season. But it will be interesting to see how Mercedes do. Max's comments in the media earlier on was quite interesting to us, where he accused Toto of smarting, shall we say, a little bit unhappy with the way that they had another bad race.
This is, of course,
Monza.
Toto Wolff also stirring the pot slightly with the Wikipedia reference, saying that records are only there for people who read Wikipedia. Do we read Wikipedia here?
Well,
Scott and Ben? Yeah.
I thought it was very disingenuous, really. I mean, we've seen Mercedes dominate for so long, and he would talk hours about the achievements of what they were doing, and I think it was very flippant to turn around and say, no one really cares about records, because ultimately we do. Formula One is all about the records, and I just found it pretty telling that that's a man perhaps that's under a little bit of pressure to turn the situation around. The car was obviously ripped up after the first qualifying session in Bahrain and redrawn, and it looks a bit like a Frankenstein at the moment. It's sort of a very strangely put together motor when you look at the actual aesthetics of it, and Scott will probably talk more about this because that's your bread and butter, but I don't know, they just seem to be getting through this season with a hope that next year's better. But of course that's how we felt last year as well.
Exactly.
There is unfortunately I think the reality for pretty much every team other than Red Bull, that the hopes that everybody had for the start of this season clearly didn't materialise. And then you spend the first part of this year thinking, okay, well, maybe there'll be the breakthrough, maybe this upgrade will fix it, maybe this will be the moment where it all clicks. The longer that doesn't happen, the more people realise that actually you need a bigger change, a more fundamental change. Now, for some people, that's more possible in season than others, and Mercedes is in that bracket along with Ferrari, where you do just have to wait, and unfortunately that means looking ahead to 24, and like Ben says, unfortunately then the cycle repeats. We get through the end of the season, we're promised a lot of progress, the winter comes and goes, you get to pre-season testing, and then maybe it all starts again.
Oh my goodness, you've mentioned Groundhog Day once in this podcast. Yes. I want to say that again. Anything else we should be looking out for this weekend? I saw Daniel Ricciardo bouncing through the paddock. His hand obviously been bolted back together, not in the car this weekend. That's what everyone was saying, wasn't it, in Zandvoort when he had that crash? Oh, it could be Singapore, and everyone was sort of going, that is a physical track. You do not want to be coming back with an injured hand. What are we hearing? When do we think he'll be back in?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. It's one race at a time, isn't it? But I reckon a couple of races. I think that it was strange at the start of the year. If you remember, Lance Stroll broke his wrist, didn't he, or something, and obviously went to see the same surgeon, but was very quickly back into the car, and everyone thought, okay, that's just the time frame now. Well, actually it's not. Every injury is obviously different, but I think it's going to be a couple of races before he's back in the car. And then obviously Red Bull got a decision to make, because Liam did okay, didn't he? Liam Lawson in the last race. If he goes well here, let's see.
And of course that's a bigger question, isn't it? Red Bull, the driver's seats, the Perez rumours, Daniel back in, Liam staying, who replaces Perez if he's out, and that merry-go-round sort of, does it even exist, Scott?
It does, but I think it's more with Red Bull's second team now. So I think the Max Verstappen, Checo Perez partnership continues for next season. I suspect that will be Checo's Red Bull Racing farewell. But then it's a question of trying to get 3 into 2 at AlphaTauri. I think there's a reason we haven't had confirmation of Yuki Tsunoda staying there for next season, which is a surprise. He's stepped up his game massively this year. I still don't think he's made an emphatic case that he should be a Red Bull Racing contender necessarily, but he's definitely doing enough to merit being kept in that team as a yardstick for whoever they want to measure alongside him. But the Ricciardo injury has complicated things, because Lawson was already on Red Bull's radar. Maybe only peripherally, but he was on the radar. He's doing a really good job racing in Japan this season in Super Formula, which is a step up from Formula 2 and is much closer to F1, and was looking like a driver that, given what Red Bull's here to achieve and what AlphaTauri's partly meant to do, he's exactly the kind of Red Bull junior that should be put in their second F1 team. That was a complication when you had Ricciardo come back in, and then maybe it was going to be Ricciardo and Tsunoda next year. Now Ricciardo's on the sideline. Lawson's actually made his case even more compelling by doing a good job stepping into the car. So suddenly there is a dilemma for them, and it is difficult. Do you stick with trying to keep Ricciardo around, even though he's towards the end of his career and has had some difficulties at McLaren and his stock has fallen? Do you bin off Tsunoda because there are rumours that he's going to leave to join the Honda Aston Martin project in 2026 anyway, so why keep him in the Red Bull family in the interim? Do you give Lawson a go, or do you just decide, no, actually we're better off not doing that because we don't think he's a special talent? It depends where their heads are at and exactly what they want to achieve with both teams, not just next year but probably in the medium term.
Wow, there's a lot for Red Bull to consider, especially with a quite loose talent scout and Dr. Helmut Marko at the moment. Maybe we'll all get signed up. A quick word on Aston Martin. You obviously mentioned that could be where Yuki Tsunoda ends up, but in terms of this weekend, I feel like they're still bringing new bits, even though it's so difficult to bring them to flyaways. Yeah,
I think they're in a position where they've obviously lost their way for various reasons through the course of the season. Actually, Lando Norris was saying that to us earlier today. One of the reasons he feels that McLaren's step looks so big is, yes, it was a big step during the year, but Aston completely fell off from almost challenging Red Bull at times. Ferrari's been super inconsistent, blah, blah, blah. So I think this will be a test of exactly how much Aston have got back on top of that, whether the parts that they keep bringing unlock even more performance. But my gut feeling is that I think it will be McLaren that's sort of more of an interesting sort of second row challenger, and who knows, maybe sniping at a Red Bull over one lap in qualifying. Should add that.
The caveat
to any kind of reference to someone competing against a Red Bull this season.
Just extinguish all hope for the rest of the grid. Ben Hunt from The Sun and Scott Mitchell-Marm from The Race, thank you so much for previewing the Singapore Grand Prix. Stay cool out there, gentlemen. It's going to be a hot weekend, getting ready for the Singapore Grand Prix. And as always, we'll have live commentary of every session this weekend across the 5 Live network, plus the usual reaction and analysis on the Checkered Flag podcast. The race gets underway at 2 o'clock on Sunday, and you can listen to full uninterrupted coverage on 5 Sports Extra. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. Next up, it's John Bennett with Euroleagues, but before that, let's get the latest BBC News.